Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Family Friday. I'm George Willett, and again, this is the channel. This is the time when we come together and we want to learn to think biblically. So, as part of that, what we've been doing here for the last few months, again, there was a time when I was out for about a month for a bunch of different reasons. So we kind of split this up. We've been trying to review and catch up. We're going over the dominant worldview of American adults. This was a study that came out. George Barna did it, a researcher that's well known for his polling, and Arizona Christian University, of how American adults view the world around them and how do they live their life. So tonight, after doing a bunch of review, we're going deeper into what this research, this is what a lot of you have said you want, is you want to get a little bit more detail. You want to know some of the questions that were asked on this survey. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but that's what's coming here in the next couple weeks as we go through these, is what are some of these questions and how did American adults answer. But I want to again show you, this is the results that came out from the Worldview inventory that they did. Is secular humanism, about 2% of the population holds to that as their dominant worldview, how they view the world and live their life. The thing called moralistic therapeutic deism, 1%, postmodernism, 1%, nihilism, 1%, Eastern mysticism and Marxism both got less than 0.5%. That's why they're just getting asterisks. The biblical worldview was 6%. I mean, of those first ones I mentioned, by and large, it was the winner by a long shot. But what they found out is that almost 9 out of 10 American adults, 88%, hold to this thing that's called syncretism. And I want to talk a little bit about that tonight, because I think it's important as we get into this that we study what each of these worldviews are and what they actually mean so we can understand them. So syncretism, a couple of official definitions, kind of a union or an attempted fusion of different religion, cultures, or philosophies. You're taking a little bit from competing worldviews and you're smashing them together and making your own personal worldview. So an easier way to say it is a combination of different forms of beliefs and practice. Now, why is this important? What's wrong with that? Well, syncretism, this is how George Barna put it in his book on page 16. Syncretism is a customized personal blend of disparate, very different ideas adopted from multiple philosophies of life. He goes on and says, syncretism reflects the superficial thinking and feelings-based decision-making that prevails in our cut and paste society. Okay, I want to break this down a little bit. Here's the problem, is we've talked before on different videos about that there's truth. And not everything can be true. If two things are against each other, if they're inconsistent with each other, then only one of them can be true. So if the Bible is true, if the biblical worldview is true, then what the Bible teaches and how the Bible expects us to live is the way we should live. Anything that goes contrary to that, anything different than that, is false by definition. So you can't mix truth and falsehood together. Here's how one person put it to me. He said, what would you call truth? It's true. If something's true, then it's true. He goes, well, if something's false, what is it? If it's a lie, well, then it's false. It's a lie. He goes, okay, what's a half-truth? That stumped me for a second. I don't know. He goes, no, how would you describe a half-truth? And he looked at me and he goes, a full lie. You see, if it's wrong even a little bit, then it's not true. You can't put falsehood with truth. You can't put darkness with light. And when we do, again, we make this very personal. It's how I feel. It's how I think. It's what I want. And it's typically based on how we feel, what makes us happy. Well, the Bible isn't given to us to make us happy, but to make us holy. Joy and happiness are byproducts of truthful living, of worshiping God. It's not the goal. So this is what syncretism does. When they look at these surveys, They said, okay, here's the dominant worldview, but they noticed that people were heavily relying, they were very strongly leaning in other worldviews. So here's what they found, is when they looked at, here's the primary worldview these people have, what's their secondary worldview that they're using to kind of support that? Well, they found that moralistic therapeutic deism, this way of having faith that sounds biblical, but it's not, 39%. A biblical worldview, this was good news, that 31% of those people surveyed, even if the biblical worldview wasn't their primary way of living their life and viewing the world, for 31%, it was something that they depended on, that they were kind of the next largest worldview they were using. Then secular humanism, 16%, postmodernism, 16%, and then nihilism, Eastern Marxism, Eastern mysticism, and Marxism, all 10% of those surveyed leaned most heavily in those directions. So they had a primary worldview and then one that they used to help them. That's syncretism. You're pulling from multiple places. And most people, it's not just two, they're taking a little bit from a lot of different places. Now, the reason for this, and the book got into this in detail, is in America, a worldview is caught, not taught. You kind of just learn it on your own without someone sitting down and teaching it to you. And the truth is, for us as Christians, that there are very few Christian churches, very few Christian schools or Christian parents that talk about or teach worldview issues. How do you view the creation of the world? How do you view who mankind is, what our nature is, what our purpose in this life is, what qualifies as a good life, and what's going to happen to us when we die? Those things just aren't discussed a lot. What's the meaning of life, and what is the quality of life? Is there an inherent value to human life? What about society and culture? I mean, what is the purpose of culture? How are we to live with each other and interact with each other? And what about ideas about justice, taking care of people, empathy? These are all important questions that, quite honestly, for Christians, we talk about the Bible and we maybe talk around these, but we don't teach them. What happens is a person's worldview is honestly caught. It's learned by the entertainment we watch, by the news media we read or watch, by politics around us. Politicians will tell us what's really important and what's not. I mean, I think you can see that really clearly in the debates that have been happening in the last few years in politics. How politicians act versus what they contribute. Talking about issues around abortion, the ruling that just came down this summer. You saw a vast difference in how politicians responded. And they were teaching and they were talking from a worldview. And that's fine, they can, but we as the church need to ask, what's the right worldview? Everyone's going to have different opinions, but what is the biblical worldview? People also pick up their worldview from non-Christian education. You see, this is what we got to remember as Christians, is the world is out there teaching our children, teaching them a worldview that goes oftentimes contrary to a Christian worldview. So that means that the church has got to step up. We've got to preach and teach. We've got to have seminars, classes. We've got to provide all sorts of opportunities, equip and prepare parents and grandparents so that they can have conversations with the kids, with our kids, about what a biblical worldview is. That we hold people accountable. We say to the people in the pews here at the port, on biblical issues, don't just trust what I say or the other ministers, Scott or Mike say. Go to the Bible and read it for yourself and see if we're telling you the truth. Because we're concerned about the people here not following us, but we want them to be following God. We want them to have a biblical worldview. We want them to think biblically about everything. But syncretism has crept into the church. We've talked about it before, that people who claim to be Christians are living a very un-Christ-like life. That's because in their head, they're saying, I'm identifying as a Christian, but I don't really know what the Bible tells me to do as a Christian, how to live. Or I can be a Christian and still live with and have sex with someone who I'm not married to. I'm a Christian, but I can lie and I can gossip and I can be angry and cheat people. I'm a Christian, but I can do tarot cards and fortune telling and astrology and depend on those things to make decisions for me. Because they've absorbed a worldview that has excluded what the Bible teaches, and they've said, I'm going to replace it with this and it's going to be okay. This is why this conversation is so vitally important in the church today. One of the things I wanted to say is I've been looking at a bunch of research, Pew Research polls, Gallup polls, Lifeway Research, Barna, about children leaving the church when they grow up. The research kind of goes over the map a little bit, but depending on which poll you're looking at, anywhere from 65 to 75% of the youth that have been part of this research for the last few years will leave the church when they leave our homes. And oftentimes because they don't have a biblical worldview. Now, some come back. I'm not sure how many. The other thing that we're really unsure of is we know that Generation Z, this newest generation, the youngest generation, is extremely different than every generation that came before it. They think differently, they're responding differently, and we don't know, as they're just now starting to have some of them come into adulthood in the last couple of years, what's going to happen. Is that number going to go even higher? When we think that we need to be studying the Bible, we do need to study the Bible. And this lesson that we're going to be going over for the next few weeks will tell us why it's so vital for us to get back into the Word, to become biblically literate. We're going to go over each of those worldviews, talk a little bit about what they are, and we're going to see some of the questions that were asked and how the majority of Americans answered these questions. All right, God bless. I hope that's helpful. I hope you find this useful, interesting. If you have any questions, you can let me know. You can put a comment down. You can message us, email us. We'd love to hear from you. God bless.